Professions are one of the things in an piracy show, by the way, are one of the things that that tie a community together. You know, person A can manufacture something that person B needs. So those two players now have a reason to interact with one another. In a lot of MMOs, in the interests of accessibility, or there are other reasons for it, players often become kind of like a one-man army in the current generation of MMOs, and even in the previous generation of MMOs that have survived up until this time. Game developers will often get to a point where, they just, players go, oh, I don't want to have to rely on somebody else for this thing, and I don't want to rely on someone else for this thing. So for the sake of convenience, because they think that that's what a community really wants, and sometimes they it's something that they want but they don't really need. When you kind of make players fully self-sufficient, you destroy that fabric that ties a community together in a social manner. Like, and you can see how I can obviously draw some parallels to another MMO, and I'm desperately trying to avoid it, because then this becomes a whole other video. But you can see how that in the past has tied those communities together. But as those profession systems have been weakened and eroded for the sake of accessibility and convenience, it has eroded that community connection beyond very small, close-knit groups. And one of the business cases against the Herald has been that hacking and improvements to hacking that would go along with the Herald, there aren't a lot of Heralds out there anymore. And the truth is because it's been a dead ship. Because it is a ship that flies you from here to there, doesn't fight well, and its main profession, which is data running and hacking, really don't exist in the game. Hacking as it exists currently in Star Citizen is a chip that you buy at a store. You just put it in a computer and it hacks the computer for you, and you just have to wait for the status bar to fill and just say, do you want to continue? Yes, I want to continue. Of course, obviously. That is kind of the extent of that profession. And in its current state, while I understand why it is the way that it is, because the limited tools that you have, the limited interactions that the current game systems avail to the players with the game universe, this is the best that they can do for now. This is just something to allow, this is just something to allow you to flip a light switch, basically. There may be a process to it, but basically all they're doing is saying anybody and everybody can do it. And here it is, so we can just get this functional and in the game. But apart from that, it's not really, something that is, intended to see the light of day in its current state, or to see, the release day in its current state. Something that's supposed to be, further developed. And I think that has been kind of like a false case against improving hacking and thereby improving the Herald, is that, well, there's not a lot of Heralds out there, so we had to make a system that was entry level for everyone. And I think that while the limitations of the game justified it at the time, I think with the upcoming Star Runner, I think that there is a much more of a justification to kind of use that as an opportunity to look at a profession like hacking and give it some supporting sinew, some supporting skeletal structure to really let it grow and develop. And I would hope that as our objectives for the immediate future and changes that we're looking to make to Star Citizen take shape, I hope that part of bringing the Star Runner into existence is not just like, oh, well, for now it's just a cargo ship, but I hope that they look at things like data running and hacking and give them a once-over, because though it may not be evident on a balance sheet, it offers you opportunities to get players to interact with one another. It in a weird way, I think that getting players to interact with one another and be interdependent on one another for different professions, different capabilities is a good thing. Some players might say, oh no, I want to do everything myself. But I think that while it's convenient, I think it erodes the social fabric of online games. Now, from a business point of view, I get it, Maybe there's only 1%. I'm just pulling a number out of my ass here, but only 1% of players currently own a Herald. Let's just say that that's the number. So if you were to say, well, we want to do something with hacking in the Herald, a business person will look at that balance sheet and say only 1% of people actually have that chip. So that would only impact 1% of the player base. So there's no justification for that. It's niche. It's far too niche to justify it being it lined up in the current framework of the game. It's, we want to do things that broadly touch as many players as possible and improve the lives and enrich the lives in the game of as many players as possible. And that's only 1%. That's too niche. And that's kind of why the Herald has been a dead ship for so long. I think that is a false premise. I think that using that as your beginning point to make that decision is inherently flawed. I think in truth, let's say Heralds and in the future Star Runners, hopefully, which is a ship that is much more widely owned. I think that if you take the time, along with the bringing in of the Star Runner, to look at hacking and look at making a few little additive elements in the game, even if it's basic, even if it's a very basic trade window between players where you open up a trade interaction and one player puts in a sum of money and another player puts in an object from their inventory, and you just kind of allow them to trade between themselves. You might look at that and say, oh no, we want to do a whole 3D projected, texturized, bespoke kind of interaction. But if you just put in something basic and allow players to interact on that level, that has a knock-on effect within the community that you may not immediately appreciate. The fact that if someone, say in a Herald or a Star Runner, can go out and hack a satellite or hack SPK remotely, then players can now interact on a level where it's like, oh, I don't want to go and I don't want to have to do this whole SPK rigmarole to lower my crime stat. Can I hire somebody to do that for me? Doing that creates an impromptu mission that you didn't have to script, that you didn't have to, kind of set all the state, like this mission here, where all these NPCs are now spawning, which is probably the part of someone else's mission that I was interfering with when I was trying to hack. But you don't have to do any of the work to create this. The community is doing all the work for you. They're creating the content themselves, and they're filling that universe with, their interactions, versus having to, we got to create 10 more missions for this new patch, otherwise people will get bored. If you give players the reasons to interact and throughout the framework of the game, let's say crime stat hacking, things like that, and then you give them the tools to interact with each other, which is remote hacking and, the ability to trade money and objects between each other, then you create almost a self-sustaining loop of content creation within the game, because the players will dynamically create content through these interactions, and you don't have to script any of it. You don't have to write up some flavor text. You don't have to create, all these different interactions and animations for all this different stuff that's happening. And, you got to go in and, like, if you think about the new Caterpillar prison mission, obviously someone had to create all of that stuff, had to create the scripting, had to create the assets, the people in the freezers, all that stuff, had to place the ship in space, had to make all these different cues that, during, within X amount of seconds of the first person boarding the ship, more UEE ships show up to try and stop you, and blah, blah, blah. You can get far more community content developed by the players on site and live by just adding in a few simple player interactions and creating game systems that necessitate players interacting with each other and not just the game systems. I think that the idea that developing these things is non-productive or is inefficient is a very narrow-minded and a very short-sighted way of looking at your development budget in Star Citizen, because giving players reasons to interact with each other and then allowing them to populate the universe with their own content is ultimately what should be your end goal, and it should be your priority, within Star Citizen. You think about something like, say, salvaging. Oh, well, we're just going to allow players who own the Reclaimer or the Vulture, whenever it gets finished, to go out and reclaim certain wreck sites. But there's not a lot of salvage ships out. There's only one salvage ship in the universe, and maybe not a lot of players own it. So why prioritize that? Because it's not that important. It's not going to impact a large amount of players. But the truth is that what if you're a player on a military mission and you blow up a bunch of ships? If those wrecks persist for a certain amount of time, that person may be able to contact someone who owns a Reclaimer, and they might be able to enter into a deal. It's like, I'll give you this location where all these wrecks are, and you can come out and reclaim all this stuff, and you pay me a certain amount of money or give me a share of the profits, and I'll protect you while you're, harvesting all these goods. The players are now creating the content within the game for you. You don't have to sit there and, create all these missions and all these different queues and all this stuff. The players are now populating the universe for you, and that should be your goal, instead of just saying, hey, new patch, 2 new missions. That's a lot of wasted development time, quite frankly, when that development time should be spent on bringing more gameplay systems like medical gameplay, scavenging, hacking, and things like that into the game. Because once you put that framework in place, the players will fill the universe for you with the content that they create live. I think that, to break it down into a nutshell, I think that the reasoning behind CIG's development and CIG's kind of philosophy, or their business reasons for choosing certain things over others in Star Citizen, is inherently flawed. CIG is approaching this as if they're developing a single player game, and we got to script all the missions, we got to do this like we're doing Squadron 42, and they're bringing that Squadron 42 approach to Star Citizen and saying, well, we got to do all the work to make all this, to make this new content for players, without realizing that if you just went and unlocked the doors to salvage and medical gameplay and tractor beams and things like that, and put NPC haulers out in space, you wouldn't have to create all these missions anymore, because players would create them for themselves. All that's necessary in a good MMO is that you put the framework in place and then let the players interact with each other and build the content in your universe. And all you have to do is then react to support that interaction. The persistent universe is populated with all the content that you could ever need, and more content than you could ever hope to create, no matter what budget you have available to you. The problem is that you don't realize that the mechanisms that are necessary to populate that universe with the content that it needs to make it live and breathe and make it a game worth playing. Persistence is a big one, but beyond that, you just have to open the faucets on the various professions. Creating something like the Idris mission or the Caterpillar mission is an interesting distraction for a time, or the Pinky Tabasco mission and all that. Those are all interesting interactions with the game universe for a very limited time, but then they're immediately eroded and forgotten. The meaningful interactions are the interactions that you have with other players in a massively multiplayer online game. So your approach to development in this case, I'm sorry to say, is fundamentally flawed and broken. The priority shouldn't be like, oh, here's the Caterpillar mission, here's the Idris mission, we got to pour a lot of effort into it. That's a waste of time, because that's content that's usable for a very brief period of time, and then it's dead. What you should be doing is focusing on things like salvaging, hacking, medical gameplay. That is the stuff that constantly adapts to that fulfills the player experience, that is always there and ready and moving, and creating its own content live that you don't have to pay to create. You don't have to spend the money or the time to create that content, because the players will create that content for you. The players are here ready and waiting to populate your universe. It's just you have to prioritize the tools to allow them to do that. And I'm sorry, but things like the Idris mission and the Caterpillar mission, while they're interesting distractions, are nothing more, and it's misspent time and misspent money. I wanted to make a video just talking about, here's some of the things that I could do, we could do with hacking that would make it more interesting. But realistically, the more I thought about it, I was like, this whole approach to game development is so fundamentally flawed. And I think that it's because people are in that Squadron 42 mindset over at CIG that they think that they have to script everything and just lead us by the hand through the game, instead of just saying, here's the game universe, here's all the tools, go forth and conquer, which should have been, the keystone to their approach to Star Citizen. My opinion. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.